Narcissists consistently selected excessively high noise levels, in contrast to the control group.
We'll look at the whole range of scores. The results of our study show that when narcissists get a good grade, they're not very aggressive, but when they get a bad grade, they set louder and longer noise blasts. Narcissistic people believe they're more deserving, they're entitled to special treatment. When they suffer a blow to their ego, when they're criticized or humiliated, they become very defensive, become very angry, and are likely to lash out and behave aggressively to others.
The link between narcissism and aggression is especially evident in the man who might be the most infamous cult leader in history. Los Angeles, August 1969. Over the course of a weekend, police discovered 7 bodies at 2 crime scenes. The victims had been stabbed and shot. Messages had been cut into their flesh and scrawled on the walls in blood. They were wealthy socialites and included film actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant with director-husband Roman Polanski's child. 3 months after the gruesome killings, investigators linked the murders to several young hippies living on an old film location, a ranch north of LA. One of the suspects admitted that the impetus had come from their leader, a self-proclaimed messiah named Charles Manson. Police were astounded. How could this short career criminal have had the power to turn middle-class kids into savage killers?
Charles Manson is the perfect prototype of a brutal cult leader. He manipulates his followers to commit his violent crimes for him. When ordering members of his cults to kill, he asserts his power and his control, satisfying his megalomania. The pain and death that his victims suffer is evidence of his hatred towards society.
Dr. Stone interviewed Catherine Scher, a one-time member of the Manson family, hoping to discover how he had managed to manipulate cult members.
Catherine Scher did not take part in the murders, yet she did live with him on the ranch, and I'm hoping she will give us rare insight into the mind of a cult leader who convinced his followers to commit murder for him as acts of devotion. So what do you think it was about him that conferred that power, as you think back?
You know, sometimes he exuded all this love from his face. When he's smiling and his eyes are shining, he looks very benevolent. Everybody was drawn to him. None of us thought he was crazy. He was just fascinating. He was just totally confident. One-on-one with you, he would be very caring, would work on your inadequacies, your needs, help you take away your fears. Every night he would talk about what your parents did to you and that they were all wrong and you were the bright ones, and he just knew what people needed. He drew all our need out and he became everything that we wanted. Did he think of himself as godlike in some way, or a special being? He never had to say so. He was real good at letting you come to that conclusion. Mm-hmm. He was really good into subliminal messages, talking about one thing and slipping in another. He must be Christ, he must be Christ, he must be Christ. Yeah. Mostly I thought he was a prophet. I thought that he heard from God and God spoke through him. That's what I thought. Charles Manson is an extreme narcissist. To understand better how he develops into a manipulative and evil cult leader, I need first to look into his childhood.
Cincinnati, Ohio, in the American Midwest, 1934. Charles Manson was born to a troubled 16-year-old runaway who did not want a child. He never knew his biological father. The name Manson came from a man who had been briefly married to his mother. During his childhood, Manson's mother often disappeared for days or weeks at a time. Once, she traded him for a pitcher of beer. His uncle tracked him down days later. At the age of 12, he was sent to the first of many reform schools. He was small in stature and overcompensated by bullying others. When he was 13 years old, he ran away from the reform school. His mother promptly sent him back.
This is a defining moment of abandonment for the young Manson. He is a non-entity, discarded by both family and society.
Manson continued escaping from reform schools and began committing increasingly violent crimes. Car theft, armed robbery, rape. He spent 2 years in prison. He urged his girlfriends to prostitute themselves and acted as their pimp. He scammed other women out of money. In 1960, at the age of 25, Charles Manson was sentenced to 10 years in prison for violating his parole conditions. Having spent most of his life locked up, Manson felt rejected by the world. He schemed to retaliate by creating his own society where he would be loved as a leader. Released from jail 3 years early in 1967, Manson moved to San Francisco, where he easily melded into the hippie scene. He lured naive young women who were rebellious but also vulnerable. Manson fed them LSD and asked them to give up all their thoughts to follow him into a greater life. Sometimes he had them mimic his actions to prove their loyalty. One such follower was Catherine Scher.
You know, I just wanted to be loved so badly that I just became whatever any man that would pay some attention to me wanted me to be.
Scher met Manson in the summer of 1968, when she was a 25-year-old hippie living in Los Angeles.
Charlie came up in a car and said, "Hey, let's all go swimming." And he'd look me straight in the eyes and pierce my eyes and said, "This is your dream, girl. Start living it." And I was fascinated. I was definitely fascinated.
That same year, a group of men and women accompanied Manson to an abandoned film set outside Los Angeles. Catherine Scher was one of them.
When you isolate someone or a group of people, there's no newspapers, there's no television, there's no parents, there's no family. You have to, burn all bridges. He becomes, the newscaster, the prophet, the, father, mother, everything. It was never a discussion. There was no discussions going on. It was us soaking up, almost like little birds with their mouths open, tell us more, feed us. He'd talk about what's going to happen in the future and things that are going to happen and prophetic things.
Manson preached that Armageddon was coming and that his followers must be loyal to him or they would not survive. They believed him.
He was not teaching that we're going to go and kill people. He was teaching survival. It's a blueprint for every cult that's ever been. Your leader is the only one that has the in with God and knows what's going to go on, and if you don't follow, then you're not going to survive it.
But was there a period of time when your tendency to think was expunged?
He would, first of all, put you down in front of everybody for thinking. He'd say, thinking is stinking. But he was just stealing everyone's soul to the point where they couldn't even form a thought.
When mind control didn't work, Manson used the threat of violence. Catherine, known in the family as Gypsy, was called to meet with Manson and another follower, who was called Clem.
And he looked at Clem and says, Clem, would you do anything for me? And Clem said, sure, you know I would. So this is what I want you to do. If Gypsy tries to leave, I want you to hunt her down, find her, tie her behind a car, and drag her. Don't kill her, just drag her all the way back to Spawn Ranch, slowly. Would you do that for me, brother? And Clem grinned and said, sure. Then he looked at me and said, Gypsy, are you going anywhere? And I said, no.
In August of 1969, Manson proved his power as a cult leader. He gave 4 of his followers knives and sent them into the homes of strangers to exhibit their loyalty.